From the private journals of Carolyn Harmon, March 14, 2022, the woman with the notebook hands didn't know I was dying. I didn't want her to. I just wanted one meal that tasted like everything was still okay. 6:51 p.m. Service alley. The Harmon Grand Hotel, Atlanta. Imani Caldwell has been sitting against this brick wall for 11 days. The hotel staff come and go through the service door 6 feet away, moving around her without slowing. She has learned, in return, to make herself still. Small. Tonight, something is wrong in the kitchen. She knows it the way she has always known things. Not from what she can see, but from what she can smell. The ventilation duct above the service door carries the pump of the kitchen every evening around this hour. Tonight, that breath is wrong. Not burning, worse. It smells like a kitchen where no one is in charge. She has been that kitchen. In 31 minutes, a man she has never met will walk through that service door looking for anyone who can save the most important night of his year. He will not know that she has already answered the question he has been carrying for 14 months, folded inside a green journal he reads before sleep. But her hands already knew. She pressed them flat against the concrete, old habits. Before we go any further, if this story already has its hands on something in you, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Turn on your notifications. It takes 5 seconds, and it means everything to us. Drop a comment below and tell us where in the world you are watching from right now, and what time it is where you are. Are you in Atlanta tonight, or Houston, or Memphis, or Baltimore? Are you watching from London, or Lagos, or Toronto, or somewhere in between? We read every single one. Because this story, the story of one woman, one notebook, and 12 years she spent making someone feel seen without knowing that was what she was doing, this is going to stay with you long after it ends. Stay with us. The shelter woke at 5:30 the way shelters do, not with a single alarm, but with the accumulated noise of 11 families trying to be quiet at the same time. Cots shifted. A child was hushed in the dark. The woman nearest the window began her morning prayer, some from Psalms low and steady, the same passage every day. Imani had learned to find it steadying rather than intrusive. There were worse things to begin a day with than someone else's faith. She dressed without turning on the light. The gray slacks, the blouse she kept sealed in a zippered bag to preserve its creases, the shoes whose soles had not yet begun to separate. She moved with the efficiency of someone who had learned to take up very little space without letting that discipline reach the inside of herself. Her daughter was still asleep. She was 6 years old, and she slept with both arms above her head, palms open, the way she had slept since she was 3 weeks old. Even here, even now, 9 months into this, Imani stood over her for a moment before waking her. That position, arms open, trusting the ceiling, still undid something in her quietly every single morning. They moved through the morning and practiced silence. By 6:11 a.m., they had signed out at the front desk. By 6:58, they were on Auburn Avenue, walking toward the bus stop at the corner of Jackson. The air was cool the way Atlanta is cool in October, briefly, and with apology. The bus came at 7:06. Imani stood at the corner and watched it go. She stayed there a moment after it disappeared. She did not try to name what she felt. She had stopped doing that. At 7:23, she was at the day labor office on Pryor Street, 14th in line before they opened. She recognized most of the faces now. They acknowledged each other the way people do when what they share is too specific and too large to mention. When the dispatcher read the morning assignments at 7:45, her name was not called. She opened the notebook and wrote a 0 in the bottom corner of the current page, the 47th 0 since August. The notebook was the 5th she had kept since 2015, when Chef Henri Beaumont handed her a blank composition book on her first morning at Maison Belle and said, without looking up from the sauce he was tasting, "Write everything down. Your mind will lie to you when you're tired. The notebook won't." She had been 29 years old and had believed him immediately. She wrote the date at the top of the first page and had not stopped since. The first 4 notebooks were in a storage unit on Magazine Street in New Orleans. She had stopped paying the rental fee 8 months ago. She did not know if they were still there. She walked from Pryor Street to the SNAP office on Mitchell. She waited 44 minutes to speak with a caseworker for 7. Her balance for the month stood at 47.12, 11 days remaining until the 1st of November. She did the calculation without being asked. $4.29 per day for 2 people. She had been trained to solve problems under pressure. She noted it as a problem and walked out. By 10, she was at the Carnegie Library on Margaret Mitchell Square, at the window table that caught afternoon light after 2 o'clock. She opened the notebook and wrote, not a recipe today, a technique. The behavior of a fig reduction depending on the ripeness of the fruit at the start, and the specific way it changed when balsamic went in early versus late. She sketched a small plating diagram in the margin, studied it, wrote the words "too much center" along the bottom edge, and adjusted the lines. She worked for nearly 2 hours. A man at the next table glanced at the notebook once and looked away. She was used to that. The slight pause people performed when they noticed what a woman in clothes like hers was doing with that kind of focus. She had stopped noticing the pause itself. She only noticed now when it did not happen. Around noon, she turned to the middle of the notebook without meaning to. The pages there were softer than the rest, worn by the particular habit have a hand returning to the same place without instruction. She found the entry she always found. Carolyn, table 4 anniversary. Braised duck, fig reduction, a pinot she never finished. Last visit March 14, 2022. Said, same time next year. She remembered the woman at table 4. The way she had carried herself with a carefulness, like someone who had made a conscious decision to be entirely present in the moment and was working to hold on to that. Amani had made the duck without being asked, because it was what she always ordered, and she had brought it out herself, which she did not always do. But that particular evening it had seemed like the right thing. The woman had eaten every bite. She had said same time next year with the kind of certainty that belongs to people who are accustomed to returning to places they love. Imani had written it down because she wrote everything down. She closed the notebook. At 4:47 p.m., she walked north along Peachtree Street toward Midtown. She passed the front entrance of the Harmon Grand Hotel without stopping. The front entrance was not her door, and turned into the service alley along the building's south face. The ventilation duct there ran warm each evening from around 5 o'clock, whenever the kitchen was running at full capacity. She had discovered this on her second night in this part of the city, when the temperature dropped quickly and she had needed something. She settled into her place against the wall, opened the notebook, and wrote. The gala guests began arriving around 6. Black cars, floor-length gowns, the particular ease for whom arriving at a place like this required no conscious preparation. Amani watched a question. She was not yet inside, patiently, professionally, out of habit. At 6:47 p.m., the smell from the ventilation duct changed. She recognized it immediately. Stock left too long without attention. Timers going unanswered. The particular, unmistakable silence of a kitchen that has lost the person at its center. She pressed her hands flat against the brick wall behind her and held them there. In 31 minutes, a man she had never met would walk through that service door. From the private journals of Carolyn Harmon, April 3, 2019. We went to Maison Belle for our 12th anniversary. Reg ordered the lamb. I ordered the duck, the same duck I always order. He says I should try something new. I tell him the duck is perfect, and I don't change things that are perfect. He laughs. He knows I mean him too. The sous chef came out at the end. She carries a notebook, and she writes things down about her regular guests. I've seen her do it. It feels like being remembered. I think that's the rarest thing. Being remembered by someone who has no obligation to remember you. Reginald Harmon had been at the hotel since 6 that morning. This was not unusual. Since Carolyn died 14 months ago, he came in early and stayed late and did not notice the hours accumulating the way he once had. Because noticing the hours meant noticing what happened when they stopped, the drive home, the empty driveway, the particular quality of silence in a house where someone had recently been. He had built the Harmon Grand in 2001, and Carolyn had built it with him. She handled what she called the soul of the place, the art, the staff culture, the specific character that made a guest feel something other than processed. He handled the structure. It was a division of labor that had worked for 23 years. Now that one side of it was gone, the hotel still ran, and that troubled him in ways he had not yet found language for. A thing should not function so smoothly after losing half of itself. Carolyn had died on a Monday in September. Breast cancer, stage 4, caught late because she had not wanted to worry anyone, and had spent years being too practiced at seeming fine. She left behind 41 years of marriage and a green cloth-covered journal that her sister brought him 2 days after the funeral, wrapped in tissue paper. She'd want you to have it, the sister had said, and looked away. He read it in pieces. He learned things he had not known, the names she gave to strangers on airplanes, arguments she had never started because she believed they would resolve themselves, her private and precise opinions on nearly everything. He was still reading it now, most evenings, before sleep. There was one passage he returned to more than any other. It was from her last visit to Maison Belle, dated March 14, 2022. She had gone alone. He had not known that until he read it. Near the end of the entry, she wrote, "The woman with the notebook hands didn't know I was dying. I didn't want her to. I just wanted one meal that tasted like everything was still okay." He had read that sentence perhaps 400 times. He did not know who the woman was. Maison Belle had closed 3 months after that dinner. The records were gone, the staff dispersed. He had made inquiries and found nothing. He carried the sentence anyway. The way you carry a story you know is not finished. Tonight was the Carolyn Harmon Foundation annual gala, the first since her death. She had started it in 2008, a fundraiser for scholarship programs serving Atlanta families who needed the help and rarely received the recognition. Every October for 16 years, she had sat at table one in a deliberate gown and worked a room of 500 people with a warmth that looked effortless to everyone who did not understand how much effort warmth requires. He had never missed one. He would not miss this one. He had considered calling it off. He had sat with that decision for 2 months and let it go. There was a sentence of Carolyn's he had worn smooth from turning it over, that a room full of people trying to do right by each other was one of the few reliable signs the world was worth the effort. He did not want to be the reason that room went dark. At 5:32 p.m., during his evening walk through the service level, he pushed open the side exit door and stepped into the alley. He saw a woman sitting against the south wall. She was writing in a notebook, her back straight against the brick, her attention entirely inward. The gala guests were arriving at the front of the building 30 feet away. The alley was loud with the city and the kitchen exhaust. None of it appeared to reach her. He stopped walking. He looked at her hands, the way she held the pen, her curved under, notebook balanced on one knee with a steadiness that suggested long practice. Something shifted in the back of his mind, the way a word shifts when you are trying to recall it, and it stays just beyond the edge of reaching. The woman with the notebook hands. He did not know why that came to him. He looked at her a moment longer than he intended. He continued walking. At 6:47 p.m., Raymond Arsenault collapsed in the walk-in cooler. Raymond had been the hotel's executive chef for 12 years, 51 years old, the kind of cook who made a kitchen feel like it had its own weather system, one he controlled, absolutely. He was found by a prep cook who came out of the walk-in immediately and at speed. The paramedics arrived in 9 minutes, a mild ischemic stroke, they said, not fatal. But Raymond was on a stretcher, and the ticket rail showed 500 covers in 68 minutes. Dwayne stood at the pass and looked at that number. He was 27 years old. On his strongest night, he had run the line for 80 covers. He had never told anyone he was afraid of the distance between 80 and 500. Terrence Wade appeared in the kitchen doorway with a clipboard. He said in the voice of a man exercising restraint in a crisis, "We reduce the menu, we manage expectations. The liability exposure on an understaffed service at this price point." Dwayne did not answer him. He walked through the service corridor and out the side door into the alley. He stood there a moment. Then he looked down. The woman with the notebook was looking up at him. He said the only words that came, "We lost our chef. 500 covers, 68 minutes." She closed the notebook. At 3:15 that afternoon, Dwayne had been sitting on the loading dock steps with a prep list on his clipboard and the expression of a man doing math that was not coming out right. He was scheduling his sauces. Beurre Blanc at 3:30, 4 hours before service. It was what he thought he had seen Raymond do, and he was working from memory in the way of someone who had paid close attention, but not quite close enough. The woman in the alley had not spoken to him before. She had been in the same corner for 3 days, and he had walked past her twice without saying anything, because he did not know what to say, and because saying nothing felt less cruel than saying something inadequate. But at 3:15, she looked up from the book and said, without preamble, "If that's a Beurre Blanc, it goes last. 20 minutes before service, not 4 hours." He looked at her. "How do you know what I'm working on?" "I can read upside down from 12 feet. He looked at the list. He looked at her. "How do you know about Beurre Blanc?" "I made it for 200 people once," she said, "in New Orleans, in a kitchen smaller than your loading dock." He did not say anything else. He went inside and moved the Beurre Blanc to 6:40. He had thought about her at 6:58, standing in the middle of the kitchen, watching Raymond's stretcher being wheeled out, looking at 500 covers in 68 minutes. He had thought, she knew about the Beurre Blanc. She knew from 12 feet in a glance at a list. Then he had walked to the side door without deciding to, because sometimes the body makes the decision before the mind signs off on it. Now she was looking up at him from the alley floor, and he had just said the only thing he had. She closed the notebook. "Who's doing proteins?" she said. "I am." "Was going to be." "What's the first course?" "Roasted beet, goat cheese, candied pecan." "Do you have a printed ticket system or is it verbal?" "Printed, rail at the pass." She stood. "Show me the stations." She had not been inside a professional kitchen in 273 days. She knew the number because she had counted, the way you count something you are trying not to miss too much. She had told herself, in the early weeks, that the counting would stop when it stopped mattering. It had not stopped. The heat hit her at the threshold, that specific total press of a kitchen running at capacity, air at roughly 90 degrees and climbing. Her body responded before her mind registered the decision. Her shoulders dropped a half inch. Her breathing slowed. Her eyes went to the stations in the particular sequence she had learned so early that it had stopped feeling like learning. Fire, then mise en place, then faces. 7 burners with active pans, 3 stations with prep underway. The pastry section at the far end, where someone was crying quietly and continuing to work. The ticket rail empty but for tonight's pre-printed order sheet taped to the top of the pass. She was at the pass in 4 steps. She read the full menu in 11 seconds. She tasted from 3 pots in 30 more, the beef stock, a mushroom demi-glace, something reducing on the back burner that tasted close but needed another 4 minutes, and a small amount of acid. She said to the nearest cook, "Red wine reduction. Chef had it going since 2. It needs sherry vinegar. Small amount. You have 45 seconds before you lose it." The cook moved. The reduction was saved. She walked the line. She repositioned a prep cook working in the wrong sequence for the orders that would come. She lowered the heat on 2 burners without explaining why. She looked at the fish station. "What's your timing on the salmon?" 4 minutes each side. Chef's instruction. 3.5. "These portions are thinner. Check your thermometer." The cook checked, adjusted. She moved to the pass and asked Dwayne for the ticket order. She was reading it when a line cook on the far right, 19 years old, 3 months out of culinary school, the kind of young that makes a person ask questions before they know which questions cost something, leaned toward Dwayne and said in a low voice, "Who is she? Does she have her food handler card?" Amani heard it. She did not turn around. "I have 9 years in professional kitchens," she said. "My certifications are inactive. If you want to discuss that, we can after service. A beat. Right now, your mirepoku is burning." The cook turned back to his station. The Georgia Food Handler Certificate required renewal every 3 years and a minimum of 8 continuing education hours annually. The renewal fee was $150. 8 months ago, when the choice had been between that fee and 3 weeks of groceries for 2 people, she had made the only calculation available to her. The knowledge had not lapsed. The paper had. There was a difference, and she had carried it in silence long enough that it no longer felt like a weight, only like a fact, the way most true things eventually become. She walked to the far end of the kitchen. She had chosen the prep station nearest the back wall, the one she could see every other station from without turning her head. She set her canvas bag on the floor beneath the prep table, pushed it back against the baseboard so it was out of the way, and straightened up. She took a borrowed apron from the hook beside the door. She tied it twice at the back, double knotted, the way her first chef had told her to tie it on her first day, because a loose apron is a liability and you only learn that lesson once. She returned to the pass. The first ticket came through at 7:17 p.m. "Ordering," she said. Her voice carried to every station without being raised. 2 beet, 1 salmon, 1 duck. On the fly, the duck is for table 4. The kitchen moved. From the private journals of Carolyn Harmon, March 2022, "I came back one last time. I didn't tell Reg. He would have wanted to come, and I didn't want him to see me the way I've been looking lately. I ordered the duck. She brought it out herself. She didn't know I'd been sick. She said, 'You were gone a long time. I was starting to worry about my favorite anniversary.' I said, 'Same time next year.' She smiled and said she'd hold the table. I nodded and walked out and sat in my car for 20 minutes before I could drive. I hope someone does the same for her someday. I hope the world is kinder to her than she knows." At 7:30 p.m., Terrence Wade called Reg from the kitchen. The call lasted 47 seconds. Wade's voice had the particular evenness of a person describing a catastrophe they would prefer to have prevented, but are not unhappy to be reporting. "An unauthorized individual," he said, "running the kitchen. In the middle of a 500 cover service. The liability exposure alone." Reg ended the call and walked to the kitchen. He had spent 23 standing in the doorway of that kitchen. He knew what a service in trouble looked and sounded like from that position, the specific quality of noise that indicated something had gone wrong at the source. A cook working too fast, a station behind, a problem that was spreading outward. He had seen it 4 times in 23 years, and he had never forgotten what it felt like to hear. He heard none of that now. What he heard was a kitchen in control. A woman stood at the pass. She was calling tickets in the even cadence of someone for whom the volume of the work was not interesting, only the precision of it. She sent a plate back to the fish station without raising her voice. She moved 4 steps left, tasted something, corrected it with 2 words to the cook beside her, and was back at the pass before the next ticket had finished printing. The 11 people around her were moving with the particular coherence of a system that has a center. She was it. He stood in the doorway for 90 seconds. He did not move. Then his eyes shifted, because something at the far end of the kitchen had registered at the edge of his vision without him noticing when. He looked at the prep station nearest the back wall. The one she had chosen, he understood now, because she could see everything from it. Under the prep table, pushed back against the baseboard, was a canvas bag, small. On the side facing him, a child's drawing in crayon, a figure with its arms spread wide, the kind of drawing that is pure intention and no technique. The bag was the size of everything a person owns when everything fits in a bag that size. He looked at it, and he thought of the sentence he had read 400 times. I hope someone does the same for her someday. He did not know why that sentence came to him in that moment. He would know later. He stepped back into the corridor. He would wait. The last dessert plate went out at 10:47 p.m. The kitchen exhaled. Dwayne lowered himself onto an overturned milk crate and put his face in his hands, and there was nothing shameful in it. A line cook was crying for the second time that evening, this time without continuing to work. Someone turned on music too loud at the back and nobody told them to stop. Imani untied the apron. She folded it and set it on the pass. She walked to the far end of the kitchen, reached under the prep table, and picked up the canvas bag. Reg was waiting in the service corridor. She stopped when she saw him. "Your name," he said. "Imani." "Where did you learn to cook?" "Mason. Bell. New Orleans. 6 years." He was quiet for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice was different. "My wife used to eat there every year for our anniversary." She looked at him. A beat passed. "What did she order?" she said. He had not expected that question. "The duck. Always the duck." "With the fig reduction," she said. Not a question. Something changed in his face. He looked at her the way you look at someone when the answer to what is happening is arriving faster than you can receive it. "A Pinot," she never finished, Imani said, very quietly. Reg could not speak for the length of time it takes to understand that something you have been carrying alone was not, in fact, carried alone. She opened the notebook. She turned to the page without searching for it. The one the note falls off pages, the ink slightly faded from being found and found again. She held it out to him. He took it. He read the entry. Carolyn, table 4, anniversary braised duck, fig reduction, a Pinot she never finished. Last visit, March 14, 2022. Said, same time next year. He looked at his wife's name, written in this woman's handwriting, in a notebook she had carried through 9 months of shelter cuts and library tables and service alleys and the brick wall outside his own hotel. Written with the same care that Carolyn had used to write about her. 2 women who had noticed each other. 2 notebooks neither of them had known about. The same name in both. He did not speak for a long time. "She wrote about that night," he said finally. In her journal, she said, "You made her feel like the world was still beautiful." Imani went very still. Not the stillness of someone trying not to cry. Something older than that. "She came in March of that year," she said. "She looked tired. I thought it was travel. I made the duck without asking. It was what she always ordered." A pause. "I brought it out myself. She ate the whole thing." "She did." She looked at the notebook in his hands. "She died 4 months later." The cleanup continued around them, water running, dishes stacking, someone laughing far away. Ordinary sounds, the kind that do not stop when the world changes. "I wrote same time next year because that's what she said," Imani said. "I always write what they say, so I remember." She had been carrying Carolyn Harmon's name for 2 years without knowing whose name it was. Through the closing of the restaurant. Through the loss of the apartment, the storage unit, the life that had existed before the alley. She had written it because that was how she honored the people who sat at her table, by keeping them. By refusing to let the ordinary fact of them pass through and leave no mark. He gave the notebook back. He looked at her and at the service door at the end of the corridor and at the kitchen still being cleaned behind her. "Come eat something," he said. "The kitchen made extra. It won't keep." She looked at him. "My daughter. Bring her." The words came before he thought about them. The morning after the gala, Reg called Imani into his office at 9:14 a.m. He offered her the sous chef position. The formal title was interim, pending the hotel's search for a permanent executive chef. The salary was $67 annually, full benefits beginning the first of the month. He had already spoken with HR about the paperwork. She asked for 24 hours to think. He said, of course. She called back at 11 a.m. and said yes. Terrence Wade submitted his first objection to HR by noon. His concerns, he explained in a 3-page memo, were operational and not personal. Imani Caldwell had no current food handler certificate, no verifiable employment history. Maison Belle's records were unavailable, and the restaurant's former owner had not responded to 2 calls, and no fixed address for standard employment documentation. He was not questioning the gala. He was questioning the process. He sent the memo to HR and a copy to the hotel's legal counsel. He did not send it to Reg. His second action was more careful. He contacted the Georgia Department of Public Health and reported that an individual without a current food handler certification had operated a commercial kitchen at the Harmon Grand on the evening of October 14th. An inspector was scheduled within 48 hours. The report was accurate. That was what made it effective. His third action was the one he spent the most time on. He had a contact at a food and hospitality publication, not one he had used before, because he had not needed to before. He made the call on a Tuesday evening, framing it as a tip from a concerned industry professional. 3 days later, a piece ran online under the headline, "The Harmon Grand's New Here, Grief or Merit?" The article was measured, named no sources, and asked in the language of reasonable inquiry whether a recent hire at one of the city's most prominent hotels might have been motivated more by its owner's personal grief than by standard professional criteria. It noted that the hire had no current food handling credentials and an employment history that could not be independently verified. Amani read it at 6:47, the staff break room, before her shift. She read it once. She closed the laptop. She went to work. The inspector arrived on Thursday morning at 10. He interviewed Amani alone in a small office near the service corridor. She answered every question directly. When he aged into the conversation, she reached into the canvas bag she had set beside her chair and removed a manila folder. Inside, her culinary school certificate, creased at the fold but legible. Her expired food safety manager certification, the renewal date underlined in pen. A handwritten employment history covering 6 years at Maison Belle, with dates, supervisor names, and weekly hours recorded to the month. The inspector wrote for several minutes. Before he left, he noted that the lapsed certification would need to be addressed for her continued employment. He did not say it needed to be addressed today. She thanked him. She went back to the kitchen. Reg had begun making calls on the Monday after the gala. He worked through a culinary industry contact in Louisiana, a former health department employee in New Orleans, and eventually a line cook who had worked Maison Belle until 2 months before it closed. The line cook was 24 years old and not difficult to find. He was willing to talk. The story assembled itself into a single clear shape. In the spring of 2022, Amani had submitted an internal report documenting 14 health code violations at Maison Belle, cold storage temperature failures, mislabeled allergen items, and overtime pay irregularities affecting 6 kitchen workers. The owner had read the report on a Friday and terminated her employment by the following Monday. No written reason was given. 3 months later, the Louisiana Department of Health closed Maison Belle for violations consistent with those she had documented. She had not been made whole. The restaurant had employed 43 people. The Warren Act, the federal law requiring 60 days advance notice before mass layoffs or facility closures, applied to employers of 100 or more. 43 put Maison Belle below that threshold by more than half. No notice was required, no severance owed. There was no legal mechanism built to catch her, or the 42 other people who had walked out of that kitchen for the last time without knowing it was the last time. She had reported the truth and lost her job. Then she had lost everything that follows a job, in the patient sequence that unfolds when you have no net, and a child and a city that does not know your name. Reg sat in the conference room on a Friday morning with 4 colleagues he trusted. Wade had been invited and had sent his apologies. Reg placed his research summary on the table. He looked at it for a moment. Then he reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and removed the green journal. He opened it to the last entry. He read the final 2 lines aloud. Not the whole entry, only these. I hope someone does the same for her someday. I hope the world is kinder to her than she knows. He closed the journal. She was sleeping outside this building for 11 days, he said. I walked past her. She saved this gala. She reported violations that cost her everything and was given nothing in return. And she made dinner for my wife on the last night Carolyn felt well enough to go out alone. He set the journal on the table. He did not raise his voice. That is not a charity hire, he said. That is a correction. At 3:40 p.m. that afternoon, Terrence Wade submitted his resignation by email. He cited personal reasons. He thanked the hotel for the opportunity. The email was 4 sentences long. Nobody called to ask him to reconsider. 7 months later, Amani's chef whites went into the laundry at the Harmon Grand on Mondays and Thursdays. Like the whites of everyone else on the kitchen staff, she had stopped noticing this. She had stopped noticing a great many things that had once required her full attention to believe. The food handler certificate on the wall above her locker was current. It had been renewed in January. The $150 fee and the 40 continuing education hours, covered by the hotel's professional development fund, the same program that paid for Raymond's annual call for training when he had been well enough to attend. Reg had arranged it with HR the same week as her contract. She had found out from the HR coordinator, who mentioned it in passing as though it were routine. She supposed it was. The apartment was in Old Fourth Ward, 3 rooms on the 2nd floor of a building on Auburn Avenue. 4 blocks from the shelter where she and her daughter had spent their last week of the previous October. The hotel had arranged it through a workforce housing partnership with a nonprofit that worked with newly employed workers transitioning out of housing instability. The place was not large. The oven ran 2 degrees hot. The kitchen table wobbled on the left front leg. Her daughter did her homework there every evening, and Imani had not yet fixed the wobble because she had grown used to the sound it made. She arrived at the hotel at 7:45 a.m., the same time every morning. She walked through the front entrance now. She had done this for 6 months. It still required no conscious decision. At her station, in the far left corner of the prep table, sat a battered composition notebook with a black and white marble cover. It held no recipes she needed to check. It sat in that corner because she had decided it should, and the decision had not required much thought. The sixth notebook, hard-covered, stiff-spined, bought new in November, held the current season's menu development. The fifth stayed where it was. 3 months after she joined the hotel, she submitted a single page to Reg through the internal menu proposal system. No cover note, just the dish. Braised duck, fig reduction, roasted root vegetables with a quality she had written down as slightly floral and had not been able to name more precisely than that. She had been making a version of this dish since 2016. She had made it for one particular guest 12 times without knowing whose table it would someday bear. Reg read the proposal on a Tuesday afternoon. He sat with it for a moment. He approved it. He did not say anything to her about it. The dish went on the autumn menu as Carolyn's table. The description read, "For the woman who believed that a good meal is a way of saying, I see you." He added a note to the hotel's reservation system the same week. Table 4 was to be held for anniversary bookings only, in perpetuity. No explanation was given to the reservation staff. None was needed. The night the autumn menu launched, Table 4 was occupied by a couple celebrating their 20th anniversary. They had seen the dish described online and made the reservation 2 weeks in advance specifically for it. They did not know the name's history. Imani plated Carolyn's table for their ticket at 7:09 p.m. She stood at the pass and looked at the finished plate for a moment before sending it out. The duck, the fig reduction, the roots with the quality she still had not named. She sent it, she plated the second order, then the third. Reg had been standing in the kitchen doorway for 4 minutes. She did not know he was there. He watched her call a correction to the fish station without raising her voice, the same way she had on the night of the gala. He watched her send a plate back, receive the corrected version, and send it out again in under 90 seconds. He watched her stand at the pass between tickets with the particular stillness of someone who is not resting but listening. He put one hand against the doorframe and held it there. He thought, Carolyn would have loved this. He already knew she did. Same time next year, the woman with the notebook hands had said, and I had nodded. I knew there wouldn't be a next year, but I believe in the discipline of hope. I believe that when someone makes you feel seen, you say yes. Even when yes is a lie. Even when yes is a gift you give to both of you. She held it. I hope she knows that was enough. I hope someone holds one for her. CH. After service, Imani walked through the service corridor. She stopped at the alley door at the far end and stood there for a moment with her hand on the handle. Then she pushed it open. The alley was quiet. The city moved at its ordinary distance. Against the south wall, in the corner where the ventilation duct ran warm, a woman sat with her head down and her knees pulled in. Imani went back to the kitchen. She took a takeaway container from the shelf, filled it from what remained of the evening staff meal, and snapped the lid closed. She walked back to the alley door. She opened it. She crossed the alley and set the container down beside the woman without speaking. She did not wait. She turned and went back inside. Her daughter was in the lobby chair near the side entrance. Her homework spread across the seat beside her. Her hair in 2 braids, her shoes tied correctly on both feet. These were 2 things Imani did every morning before they left the apartment. Not because anyone had asked. Because some mornings, when you get back what you thought you had lost for good, you braid the hair carefully. You tie the shoes twice. You do the small things as though they matter, because they do. When her daughter looked up and saw her coming through the door, she said something Imani could not hear from that distance. Imani smiled, the smile of a woman who had chosen to keep going. Every morning, the same choice. And this was where it had led her, not to luck, not to rescue, but to here. To a kitchen that was hers. To a table held in a name she had written down 2 years ago because she wrote everything down. To a daughter who looked up when she walked through the door. To herself. Imani Caldwell is not a real person. The Harmon Grand Hotel does not exist. Carolyn Harmon's journals were written for this story, but the circumstances that brought Imani to that alley are documented and current. According to the National Alliance to End Homelessness, more than 1% of individuals experiencing homelessness in the United States are employed at the time they become unhoused. A paycheck and a home stop being the same thing for a lot of people, quietly without announcement. The WARN Act requires employers of 100 or more workers to provide 60 days advance notice before mass layoffs or closures. Most restaurants employ fewer than 20 people. Maison Velle, in this story, employed 43. Every person on that staff fell below the federal threshold. None of them had to be warned. The Georgia Food Handler Certificate costs $150 to renew and requires 8 continuing education hours annually. For someone who loses their job and housing in the same month, $150 is not a small number. This story was written because I believe that what people carry matters more than how they appear to be carrying it. Amani carried a notebook. In that notebook, she carried 12 years of someone's anniversaries without knowing whose they were. She is not alone in that. Before you go, I want to ask you something. Has there ever been a moment in your life when someone stopped, really stopped, and saw you? Not what you owned, not what you had lost, not the story they had already decided about you before you opened your mouth. Just you, exactly as you were, on that particular day. And without being asked, they gave you something, a meal, a word, an hour of their time, or simply the act of writing your name down somewhere and keeping it. If that has ever happened to you, even once, you already understand what this story is about. And if it has not happened yet, if you are still waiting to be seen, if you are carrying something heavy through a world that keeps stepping around you, then I want you to hear this. What you carry matters, what you know matters. The notebook, whatever yours looks like, matters. Amani wrote things down because she believed the people who sat at her table were worth remembering. She did not know she was leaving a record of herself at the same time. She did not know that record would find its way back to her when she needed it most. We never fully know what we are giving when we give with that kind of attention. So if this story moved something in you today, leave a comment below. Tell us where in the world you are watching from right now, and what time it is where you are. Tell us if this reminded you of someone. Tell us if it reminded you of yourself. If you have not already, please like this video and subscribe to our channel. Turn on your notifications. New stories go up regularly, and every one of them is written for the same reason this one was, because the people who keep going deserve to be seen. Share the story with someone who needs it today. You already know who that person is. Stay kind, stay blessed, and never underestimate the power of one quiet act of love.